Or license the full resolution files from Adobe stock. You can find the links to these images right below this video in the snow border. I have them on 2 separate layers, of course. And what we want to do is we want to isolate this black area here. We can of course create a selection around the black area to isolate it, but I like working with vectors better because they give you smaller file sizes and they're easier to edit. So we're going to create a vector around the frame. So I'm going to press Z on the keyboard. I'm holding the Z key. I'm not letting go of it. And I'm going to zoom in to the corner here and release the Z key. It'll bring me back to the pen tool, which I had selected. Make sure that you have shape on the options panel on this drop down. Click on one, you can see it. There it is, red. What I'm going to do now is enable the layer of the snow border. I'm going to click and drag her up to the top of the layers panel. And I'm also going to double tap here on the zoom tool just so we can see the image at 100%. And actually, now that I'm looking at it at 100%, I'm actually going to right click on it and choose fit on screen so that I can see the entire composition. Then I'm going to press Ctrl J, Shift Alt, that's Shift Option on the Mac. Now at this point, we can go back and adjust the layer mask if we need to. So I'm going to zoom in just so we can see the areas that we need to work on. So we need to work on this area and then the blue outline around her body. So we can adjust that by clicking on the layer mask in the properties panel. You can click on mask edge. If you don't see the properties panel, you can go into window, properties, click on mask edge, and then maybe shift the edge with a negative value and see how that's adjusted. So and keep adjusting it and making sure that that line is gone, but we don't lose any detail that we want to keep. Also, with this brush selected, I can click and drag here on the hair, and hopefully we'll get a better selection. So now, didn't do that good of a job here, so I'm just gonna leave it like this for now, and then I can come back with the brush tool and fix that in a moment. So I'm gonna press OK. And I'm not going to take the time to do so now. I will do that after the tutorial and you can see the final image, but I'm just going to go around the entire image and just make sure that everything is masked out accordingly. And in most of these areas, everything seems to be okay. I know we got to work on this area here. And like I said, I'll do that after I'm done with the tutorial and you can see my final result. But for now, we'll just leave it as is. I'm going to press Z on the keyboard, right click, and choose fit to screen. And what we're going to work on now is extra elements that are going to help our composite look much more realistic and much more interesting. So from the Adobe stock library, I downloaded 2 elements we're going to use. We're going to use this shovel with the snow. So let me just double click on that to open that up. And by the way, the links to these files are on the description. You have to download them from Adobe stock. They're not free, but you can use a watermark preview to practice on. So I would recommend you doing that just so that you can have a way to practice and learn. So the first thing I got is panel. And I'm going to look for the channel that's got the most contrast. In this case, the blue channel. I'm going to click and drag on the blue channel and drop it here in the new channel icon to duplicate it. Now with action active, I can fill with white. White is currently my foreground color. To fill with the foreground color, you can hold Alt and Backspace, Option, text, and then I'll just work on the edges in the next step. So I'm going to press OK. And what I'm going to do now is go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, and bring the levels to the right, the dark values to the right, so we have more contrast between the snow and the ground. And remember, we're going to be making a selection. Anything that's white in this screen will be selected. Anything that is black will be deselected. So I'm going to drag this one over to the left a little bit. I'm looking at the edges here. And maybe drag this one to the left as well. And press OK. Now, what I'm going to do now is click on the brush tool, select black as my on the background layer, which is the only layer that we have in this document. I'm going to click on the new layer mask icon and notice now that the floor is no longer there. Now, it's not a perfect selection, but it's going to work because the color of the floor and the color of the table are very similar colors, and I think we're going to be able to get away with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply click on the layer, select the move tool, click and drag the layer over onto the other file by hovering over the tab. So we're going to need to scale it down. Control T, Command T on the Mac, transform. We can't see the corner handles, so I'm going to press Control 0, Command 0 on the Mac. There's the corner handles, and now I'm going to adjust them accordingly. I'm holding Shift as I'm clicking with better, and I can even distort it if I want to. Maybe right click on it and choose Distort, just to get a better perspective of scene that we're working with. Maybe something like this, and press Enter when you're done. Now that we have this file in place, I'm going to press Z on the keyboard, right click, fit to screen. Then I'm going to press V on the keyboard to get the move tool, and maybe I can move it around if I need to. And I'm going to click on the new group icon to create a new group. I'm going to click and drag this snow layer in there. I'm going to collapse it, and now it's in that group. Next, I'm going to hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon to create a black layer mask which hides everything. Then, with the brush tool, I can paint with white on this layer mask to start revealing some of that snow, such as these snow elements that were also downloaded from Adobe Stock. By the way, if you don't have Photoshop CC, you won't have the libraries panel, but you can still download the watermark previews onto your desktop and bring them into Photoshop as you would any other image. So you can still work with the previews. So what I'm going to do now is just select one of these elements and bring it over to the file that I'm working with. So I'm going to click on the lasso tool, and I'm going to select this element first. So I'm going to select it, go to Edit and Copy, or you can press Control C. I'm going to deselect that element, Control D, Command D on the Mac, go back into the file that we're working with. I'm going to paste it here, Control V, Command V on Control 0. This one in as well, and I'm going to zoom in and rotate this one into position, maybe right about here or so, but I want this one to be in the back, so I'm going to click and drag this one and place it way back here. And I'm going to press V to select the move tool, and I'm going to move it around just to fit it into position, so maybe something like this. And actually I just realized that I made a mistake. Notice how this element gets cut off right in this area? That's because this element needs to be right here. It needs to be in between the layer that's popping out the subject and the layer that is clipped to the vector. So right in between those two. So now the snow follows through into the frame. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to work with shadows. So first of all, the snow here on the table, it needs a shadow. So I'm going to open up a little drop shadow there. You can use the settings that I have here if you like. Notice that I'm not using black, I'm using a dark burgundy color, which is similar to that color you see right there, right under the frame. And just brought the intensity down to about 25% using multiply. And notice the light is coming from the right. The light on her face is coming from the right, and so is the light hitting the frame. So you sort of want to match that with the shadow. So the shadows percent, this is what that looks like. Obviously that's too much, so leave it at about 25% or so. And what I'm going to do now is right above this snow element here, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to paint with this color here under the board. So you can click on the eyedropper tool, select that color, and maybe make it a little bit darker because it's too light. Something like that, and just continue that shadow that's coming off the board. And actually let me drag this layer up on a little more time, placing the elements and moving things around so they fit a little bit better. But these are the techniques that I use to create this effect. If you decide to create an image using this tutorial or any of my tutorials, then upload it to Instagram with the hashtag PTCVids party. You can press Control 0, that's Command 0 on the Mac, for the bird's eye view that allows you to see all four corner handles. Then I'm going to click and drag on this one here to scale it down by holding Shift, Alt, that's Shift, Option on the Mac. Now at this point, we can go back and adjust the layer mask if we need to. So I'm going to zoom in just so we can see the areas that we need to work on. So we need to work on this area and then the blue outline around her body. So we can adjust that by clicking on the layer mask in the properties panel. You can click on mask edge. If you don't see the properties panel, you can go into window, properties, click on mask edge, and then maybe shifting it and making sure that that line is gone, but we don't lose any detail that we want to keep. Also, with this brush selected, I can click and drag here on the hair, and hopefully we'll get a better selection. So now, didn't do that good of a job here, so I'm just gonna leave it like this for now, and then I can come back with the brush tool and fix that in a moment. So I'm gonna press OK, click on the brush tool, paint with white in areas that I want to keep. So I'm just gonna paint with white in these areas here. And I know I'm selecting some of the sky, but that's okay. I'm going to get rid of that by pressing X on the keyboard with an image, but I'm just going to go around the entire image and just make sure that everything is masked out accordingly. And in most of these areas, everything seems to be okay. I know we got to work on this area here. And like I said, I'll do that after I'm done with the tutorial and you can see my final result. But for now, we'll just leave it as is. I'm going to press Z on the keyboard, right click, and choose fit to screen. And what we're going to work on now is extra elements that are going to help our composite look much more realistic and much more interesting. So from the Adobe stock library, I downloaded 2 elements we're going to use. We're going to use this shovel with the snow, so let me just double click on that to open that up. And by the way, the links to these files are on the description. You have to download them from Adobe stock. They're not free, but you can use a watermark preview. So I'm just gonna leave it like this for now, and then I can come back with the brush tool and fix that in a moment. So I'm gonna press OK, click on the brush tool, paint with white in areas that I want to keep. So I'm just gonna paint with white in these areas here. And I know I'm selecting some of the sky, but that's okay. I'm gonna get rid of that by pressing X on the keyboard, which swaps the foreground and background color. And with black, I'm gonna paint on that layer mask to get rid of the sky here. And I'm not gonna take the time to do so now. I will do that after the tutorial and you can see the final image, but I'm just gonna go around the entire image and just make sure that everything is masked out accordingly. And in most of these areas, everything seems to be okay. I know we gotta work on this area here. And like I said, I'll do that after I'm done with the tutorial and you can see my final result. But for now, we'll just leave it as is. I'm gonna press Z on the keyboard, right click, and choose fit to screen. And what we're gonna work on now is extra elements that are gonna help our composite look much more realistic and much more interesting. So from the Adobe stock library, I downloaded 2 elements we're gonna use. We're gonna use this shovel with snow, so let me just double click on that to open that up. And by the way, the links to these files are on the description. You have to download them from Adobe stock. They're not free, but you can use a watermark preview to practice on. So I would recommend you doing that just so that you can have a way to practice and learn. So the first thing I gotta do is get rid of the shovel. I'm gonna click on the lasso tool. I'm gonna make a selection around the shovel. And as you can see, it's not very accurate. It's okay. Then I can hold Shift and Backspace. Or you can go into Edit, Fill to bring up the Fill menu. Under Contents, choose Content Aware and press OK. And Photoshop will fill in those pixels and make the shovel disappear. I'm going to press Ctrl D, Command D on the Mac to deselect. And this is what we're going to work with. The first thing that we need to do is mask out the snow from the ground. So I'm going to go into the Channels panel, and I'm going to look for the channel that's got the most contrast. In this case, the blue channel. I'm going to click and drag on the blue channel and drop it here in the new channel icon to duplicate it. Now with the duplicate channel, I can start making adjustments to it. The first thing I'm going to do is fill with white the areas that I want to keep for sure. So with the lasso tool selected, I'm just going to click and drag and make a very rough selection on the areas that I know for sure I want to keep, which is all this top part here. Now that I have the selection active, I can fill with white. White is currently my foreground color. To fill with the foreground color, you can hold Alt, Backspace, Option, Backspace on the Mac, then Control D, Command D on the Mac to deselect. Now we got to work on this bottom part. There's a feature in Photoshop called Apply Image. If you go into Image, Apply Image, what Apply Image allows you to do is to take an image and apply it onto itself using a blend mode. In this case, we're taking the blue copy, applying the green blend mode onto itself. So notice what happens here on the snow on the edge. It essentially turns white, which is what we want. You could also, of course, apply a multiply blend mode and it'll give you a different result. In this case, I think I'm going to go with green, and then I'll just work on the edges in the next step. So I'm going to press OK. And what I'm going to do now is go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, and bring the levels to the right, the dark values to the right, so we have more contrast between the snow and the ground. And remember, we're going to be making a selection. Anything that's white in this screen will be selected. Anything that is black will be deselected. So I'm going to drag this one over to the left a little bit. I'm looking at the edges here. And maybe drag this one to the left as well. And press OK. Now, what I'm going to do now is click on the brush tool, select black as my foreground color so I can paint with black. I'm going to increase the size of my brush by clicking on the right bracket key on the keyboard. And I'm just going to paint with black. And again, you don't have to be very accurate. As long as you get close enough, it should be good. And I'm just painting these pixels away, which represent 4. And once again, I'm going to go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, and darken up some of the darker pixels and brighten up the midtones a little bit. And press OK. So this selection looks like it'll work. So I'm going to press Control, Command on the Mac, click on the blue copy icon to make a selection around it. Go back into the Layers panel. On the background layer, which is the only layer that we have in this document, I'm going to click on the new layer mask icon. And notice now that the floor is no longer there. Now, it's not a perfect selection, but it's going to work because the color of the floor and the color of the table are very similar colors, and I think we're going to be able to get away with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply click on the layer, select the Move tool, click and drag the layer over onto the other file by hovering over the tab, then coming down and releasing, and there's our file. It's a really big layer, so we're going to need to scale it down. Control T, Command T on the Mac to transform. We can't see the corner handles, so I'm going to press Control 0, Command 0 on the Mac. There's the corner handles, and now I'm going to adjust them accordingly. I'm holding Shift as I'm clicking on these corner handles to keep the file constrained. The angle's not really matching my scene, so I'm going to right click on it and choose Flip Horizontal. And from here, I can match the scene a little bit better, and I can even distort it if I want to. Maybe right click on it and choose Distort just to get a better perspective of the scene that we're working with, maybe something like this. And we're done. And now that we have this file in place, I'm going to press V on the keyboard, right click, fit to screen. Then I'm going to press V on the keyboard to get the Move tool, and maybe I can move it. Click on the new group icon to create a new group. I'm going to click and drag this snow layer in there. I'm going to collapse it, and now it's in that group. Next, I'm going to hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon to create a black layer mask which hides everything. Then, with the brush tool, I can paint with white on this layer mask to start revealing some of that snow. So I'm going to use the bracket keys on the keyboard as I work to increase and decrease the size of my brush. So I'm just painting with white, just bringing in some of that snow. And if you make a mistake, you can press X on the keyboard to paint with black and maybe shape the snow a little bit better. Maybe something like that. What we're going to do now is work with different elements. So I'm going to open up the Libraries panel, and I'm going to open up this file here, which is these snow elements that were also downloaded from Adobe Stock. By the way, if you don't have Photoshop CC, you won't have the Libraries panel, but you can still download the watermark previews onto your desktop and bring them into Photoshop as you would any other image. So you can still work with the previews. Now just select one of these elements and bring it over to the file that I'm working with. So I'm going to click on the lasso tool, and I'm going to select this element first. So I'm going to pixels disappear. For me, only keep the bright pixels, in this case the snow. Then I'm going to press Control T, Command T to transform. Control 0, Command 0 for bird's eye view, and I'm going scale this element down. I'm going to press Control 0, Command 0 again, zoom back in, and I'm going to just rotate it and make it fit accordingly. Now in this case, I'm going to flip it horizontally. So right click on it, flip horizontally, and keep rotating it. Maybe something like this. And I can, scale it more if I need to, or rotate it more if I need to. So whatever distortions I need to do for it to work. So maybe something like that. So I just press enter to accept that transformation. And I'm going to use one more element. I'm going to use this one right down here. Again, Control C to copy and paste that in here. Change the blend mode to screen. Control T to transform. That's Command T in the Mac. Control 0. Command 0 on the Mac, and scale this one in as well. And I'm going to zoom in and rotate this one into position, maybe right about here or so. But I want this one to be in the back, so I'm going to click and drag this one and place it way back here. And I'm going to press V to select the move tool, and I'm going to move it around just to fit it into position, so maybe something like this. And actually, I just realized that I made a mistake. Notice how this element is cut off right in this area? That's because this element needs to be right there. It needs to be in between the layer that's popping out of the subject and the layer that's fit to the vector. So right in between those two. So now the snow follows through into the frame. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to work with the shadows. So first of all, the snow here on the table, it needs a shadow. So I'm going to open up this group, double click on the snow layer here, and click on drop shadow. Notice a little drop shadow there. You can use the settings that I have here if you like. Notice that I'm not using black, I'm using a dark burgundy color, which is similar to that color you see right there, right under the frame. And just brought the intensity down to about 25% using multiply. And notice the light is coming from the right. The light on her face is coming from the right, and so is the light hitting the frame. So you sort of want to match that with the shadows. So the shadows will be on the left side, sort of like here behind the frame. So this is what this is showing. So if I were to bring it up to 100%, this is what that looks like. Obviously that's too much, so leave it at about 25% or so. And what I'm going to do now is right above now that the floor is no longer there. Now, it's not a perfect selection, but it's going to work because the color of the floor and the color of the table are very similar colors, and I think we're going to be able to get away with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply click on the layer, select the move tool, click and drag the layer over onto the other file by hovering over the tab, and then coming down and releasing, and there's our file. It's a really big layer.